Adam, are we still thinking about the yen this morning? I mean, to some extent, this was yesterday's real area of focus, wasn't it? But today we see the yen underperforming a little bit, and that's perhaps not what those who want a stronger yen wanted to see. So what's our latest conclusion as to whether this intervention by the Japanese and the Americans will work?
Yeah, I think when you consider the fact that we've had a couple of confirmed rounds of intervention now, which is also coordinated with the US, and we've had warnings from US Treasury Secretary Bessent, it's been particularly disappointing. I mean, even at the trough, we didn't really break through the May lows. I think the Japanese officials would have been hoping they would have got below 155. So I think when you also consider the positioning backdrop, I mean, yen shorts, they were highest since July 2024. Dollar positioning was at record highs on some measures. It's a pretty pitiful response from what we've seen. And I think, ultimately there's a couple of things at play here. One is that the BOJ just isn't playing its role. We kind of get this continued communication effort from them that they may do something at some point in the future. In a world as price of Fed hikes, that just isn't good enough. And we saw some angst about the BOJ overnight, so that's soft 10-year JGB auction as well. So that's also front of mind. But also as well, quite simply from a geopolitical standpoint, with something out of control for Japanese officials, is that they need this war to end. They need oil prices to come lower.
Yeah, so it's kind of a waste of money on this intervention unless you get a step in from the BOJ. Just on that geopolitical point, the headlines flying around, the comments flying around, Donald Trump being pretty angry towards Iran, them saying that the talks aren't even happening. What does the market need to have greater progress?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty high bar at the moment for success. We saw Trump be relatively bullish on the prospects over the weekend. At the same time, Iran was talking with Oman about the Strait of Hormuz, but it wasn't even about the full reopening of it. And traffic through the Strait of Hormuz is still particularly low. Then in other parts of the Middle East, traffic flows are relatively low. I think, obviously we need to see Trump's bullishness over the weekend reciprocated from Iran, but we're just simply not seeing that at the moment. They're just saying that, the US needs to change its behaviour. And I think even if we do get an interim peace agreement, then I think the market's going to be particularly wary of it, given that we've already had one broken down. And then since the onset of the conflict, as far as I can tell, there's been no progress on nuclear. So I think, energy prices will stay sticky. And in that environment, upside for bonds is limited, particularly in the US, where there's a real rate story, and then also for Europe.
Yeah, let me ask you about the data point of the week, which is non-farm payrolls, due on Friday, of course, Adam. Are we concerned? I mean, last week we saw that steepener trade, partly due to the Fed narrative rather than the data, but we don't really know how the Fed is going to react to data. That's by design, Kevin Walsh has told us. So how are you thinking the market could respond then to this non-farm payrolls?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big data point. We need to play the ball, not the referee, as Kevin Walsh says. And any data point now is a much higher vol event than it otherwise would have been. There's plenty of scope to reprice a September hike, only price around 65%. I think it's more interesting if we get a hot report. Do markets really ramp up these wages at the front end? I think the Fed's getting behind the curve. But also at the back end of the curve, there's a real rate story, which is really driving things as well. We saw strong ISM yesterday. And if you see a strong NFP, do we start getting 30-year yields towards 5.3%, and then does that also become a cross-asset story as well?